Hi class, welcome back to another lesson today. But before I jump into 1.4, I want to go do some 3-column notes that are going to help you if you are still struggling with adding or subtracting integers. Pause the video, go get a piece of paper, fold it in 3 columns, and let's get started. Make sure to have your name on the top left hand corner and the date. The first situation would be whenever you are adding. Okay, so if you are adding two numbers, two integers, if those two integers are positive, then your answer is going to be positive. Again, if you feel that I'm going by too fast, stop me so you can copy and then continue the video. An example of that could be 2 plus 3. It's your regular addition basically, equal 5. And since I'm done with the 3 columns, now I can go ahead and create that row. Oops, here. Okay, and I'm ready for the next situation. And an example of that could be -3 plus, the key is that you are adding, that's why we don't have to deal with the adding the opposite and any of that, because we are just adding. So adding -4, and the answer would be -7. Okay, so since we have the 3 columns filled out, then I can go ahead and create the next row. Remember, what we don't want is creating some sort of weird zigzag. It has to be a straight row. Okay. Now this is when things start getting complicated. So we are still adding, but we are adding integers with different signs. In this case, if you notice, I made the plus sign bigger than the negative sign to remind you that whenever you are adding integers or of different signs, then you are going to subtract the smallest from the greatest, and you are going to keep the sign of the digit with the greatest value, or the greatest absolute value. Plus -3 In this case, we are just going to use the absolute value of both numbers, so we are just going to say 8 minus 3 gives me 5. And because the 8 is the largest number and 8 is positive, then I'm going to keep the answer positive. Again, I created the negative sign a lot bigger than the positive side to represent that this digit number is going to be greater. And it's the same explanation as the previous one, so let me write that down. An example of that would be -9 plus 5. So again, this one's you use the absolute value, so you use the 9 minus 5, that gives me 4. And if we keep the sign of the largest number, which would be the 9, then your answer becomes negative. Okay, and again, all of these 4 examples are whenever you are adding. And now we are going to look at what happens when you are subtracting. Now we are going to be subtracting. Whenever we subtract, this is when we use the rules that we learned, and we Remember we said subtracting a positive is the same as adding a negative. So that's what we are going to apply whenever we are subtracting. Say that we have 9 minus negative 3. Okay, so we keep the first digit, then we change it. So when subtracting a negative is the same as adding a positive. So I'm going to change that to a positive, and I'm going to change the negative 3 to positive 3. Then that gives me 12, and 9 is greater than 3 in absolute value, so I'm going to keep my answer positive. For this one, I am going to keep the middle column like that because you are basically doing the same thing for every situation. You keep the first number, change the subtraction to addition, and change the second number, and then you keep the sign of the largest number. Negative 5 minus negative 2. So keep the first number. We change the subtraction to addition. We changed the second number, and then we subtract 5 minus 2. So remember, when we looked at the addition, we are adding a negative and a positive. So when we come back here and remember adding, like this one, adding a negative and a positive, then you just find the absolute value and you keep the sign of the largest number. So we are going to apply that because now we are adding a negative and a positive. Okay, so 5 minus 2 gives you 3, and that is going to be negative because 5 is the largest value and that is a negative number. This one is just a regular subtraction, but even if we follow the steps, we are still going to get the same answer. So 6 minus 3, you already know that is 3 and it's positive, but if I follow the steps, I'm still going to get the same answer, and you need to practice the steps so that when you get into a situation like this one, then you'll know what to do. So again, it says that I have to keep the first digit. I keep the first digit, then I change the sign of the operation, then I change the sign of the number, and then I do the absolute value. So 6, I subtract the absolute value of those two. That gives me a 3. 6 is a greater number and is positive, therefore my answer has to be positive. You can either look at the absolute value or you can look back at the addition rules and you'll be able to do it. But even if you do the absolute value of each, if you just do 8 plus 2, that gives you 10, and then you keep the sign of the greatest number, which is the negative 8. Therefore, your answer has to be negative. But again, if you look at the situation, you are adding two negatives, and if you go back here, whenever you are adding two negatives, then you add them like regular numbers and you keep the negative sign. The goal whenever you are subtracting is to change the subtraction to an addition so that you can add them like regular numbers, because if you notice the addition, adding integers is a lot easier than subtracting integers, so your goal is to change that into addition. But when you do that, you also have to change the second number. Then you just add the numbers regularly and keep the sign of the greatest, of the largest integer.
So when you have different numbers, so let's say that you have 9 minus 3 plus 7 minus 1. Okay, so you want to start from left and then you move to the right. You start on the left side and then you move to the right. So we are going to start here. Okay, so I give the 9, I change that to positive and that to negative. So then I say 9 plus 3 gives me 12, and I keep it positive because the 9 is positive. Okay, then I bring the next digit plus 7. They're both positive, I could just add them. So 7, 8, 9, 19, and then I subtract 1. I could do regular subtraction because they're both positive. So then my answer is 18 positive because 19 is positive. Okay, so whenever you have a list of different integers with different signs, use the same rules apply, but just start from left, do 2 at a time, and keep adding 1 until you reach the last one on the right. Okay, so now let's do lesson 1.4, which is applying those rules into real world problems. And whenever we work on problems, on word problems, it's important that you draw. So draw a sketch because that will help you create an understanding of what's going on, and you'll be able to solve that problem.
Okay, lesson 1.4 starts on page 25. Applying addition and subtraction of integers. Our essential question is, how do you solve multi-step problems involving addition and subtraction of integers? So again, we are going to learn how to add and subtract integers to solve multi-step problems by using a sketch. Let's read the problem. A seal is swimming in the ocean 5 feet below sea level. It dives down 12 feet to catch some fish. Then the seal swims 8 feet up towards the surface with its catch. What's the seal's final elevation relative to sea level? Okay, so if you notice on the right, they created a sketch for you. Well, this is not really a sketch. This would be more like a really good drawing. For us, we just work on really quick sketches because we don't want to waste our time for this to create a fancy drawing. So whenever it says relative to sea level, that means that sea level is our 0 position. Okay, and then we have to go step by step. So we have a seal and it was 5 feet below. So below means like under, so it's negative. It's at negative 5. And then it dives down 12 after that. 12 feet down after that. Again, down means negative. And then it goes up towards the surface 8 feet. So whenever we go up means positive. Okay. So now we have to see what is its final elevation. So how far from the surface is it? So if we look at our number line, we can see that our answer is somewhere in between -5 and -10, but it's closer to -10 because that's where it ended. But again, to do that, to find the final answer, we are going to create an equation. So let's see, it started at negative, -5, and then it went down another 12, and then it went up 8. Okay, so it has 3 integers. We have to start from left to right and use the rules that we learned. Now both of these are addition, so it's going to be easy. We can see that we have 5 feet below sea level right here, and then it dives down 12 feet, and then it went up 8 feet. Okay, so we just add them. 5 plus 12 is 17. It's negative because 12 is the largest number and is negative. Now we add the 8. So whenever we are adding, we subtract the smallest from the largest and keep the sign of the largest number. So we are going to say 17 minus 8, and that would be 9. And I am going to keep it negative because the 17 is negative. Okay, so the final elevation, okay, the seal's final elevation is -9. And again, if there's a word that you don't understand, you can Google it and find what that word means. Go ahead and do number 1 on your own. Remember, if you don't know what a word means, just Google it. Basically, descent means you're going down, and ascend means you are going up. And this one, it says applying properties to solve problems. Okay, so let's see. A checking account. She writes a $160 check for groceries. Then she deposits $125. Finally, she writes another check for $40. What was the total change in the amount of in Irene's account? Okay, so again, my first step is to create a quick sketch for better understanding of the situation. So I have this lady. Again, sketch means quick sketch. And she writes a check for $160 for groceries. So if she writes a check, that means it's money that she's taking out of her account, so that we are going to keep it negative. So it's money going away from her, right? So then she goes to the bank, she goes to the ATM, a check for 5. And you can see it better. She deposits. That means she's adding more money to her bank account. So that's a positive number. And then at the last part, she comes another day with another check, but this one is $40. And again, oh no, she writes another check. Sorry about that. So she writes another check, which means it's getting it from her banking account. So that's another negative number. Right? So number because so this happened first, then second, and then third. Alright, so they want to know how much money she has left in her account. Okay, so we started with 160. She went and added 125, and then she subtracted $40. So what would be the final count? So remember that we were talking about being going from left to right. Um, sorry, that was positive because those are things that are happening. So we were talking about going from left to right, and so another way that you can do is that you can group differently. So actually, you can do 160 and 40 first because I know that those are friendly numbers. I know that 60 and 40 make 100, so that would be 200. So that would be 160 plus negative like any number that would give me 200, and I keep the negative sign. Again, when we're adding, you can group the numbers that you are adding, um, but when there's subtraction, then you can apply this. We are able to do this because again, we are adding. So now that we have 200, we have to add that. So we have negative 200 plus 125. So then we subtract them the regular way we would, and we keep the sign of the greater number. So that would be 75, and it would be negative. So now the negative means that she actually owes money to the bank. She spent more money than what she earned, so now she's in debt. You don't want to be in debt. Do number 3 for sure. Number 3, it's very similar about writing checks and making deposits. So writing checks is negative, making deposits is positive. So here is our third example, and now we are comparing values of expressions. Sometimes you may want to compare values obtained by adding and subtracting integers. So let's see, the Tigers, a football team, must gain 10 yards in the next 4 plays to keep possession of the ball. The Tigers lose 12 yards, gain 5 yards, lose 8 yards, and gain 14 yards. Do the Tigers maintain possession of the ball? Again, um, let's try to figure this out. So we have the Tigers is a football team, and it must gain 10 yards in the next 4 plays. So 4 plays, and it has to gain 10 yards. So the goal is to gain 10 yards. And let's see if they did. Okay, so in the first they lost 12 yards, so that's a negative number. And then they gained 5 yards, then they lost 8 yards, and gained 14 yards. Goal, right, that they must gain. This was the key word that lets me know that that was the goal. And this is what actually happened. So this would be oops, reality. Um, they met the expectation. So I'm going to start from left to right. So I'm going to start with these two. 12 minus 5. 12 minus 5 is 7. And I keep it because, again, 12 was negative. Plus negative 8, I add them. 7 plus 7, 14 plus 1 more is 15. They're both negative, so I keep it negative, or you're going to say the largest number is 8. Sorry, the largest number is 8. That one's a negative, so our answer has to be negative. And now I add that to the 14, so now I have negative 15 plus 14. 15 is 1, digit is 15 and that one is negative. So I'm going to keep it negative. So the expectation was 10 yards. The reality was negative 1 yard, which means they lost. So that means that negative 1 is obviously less than 10. So maintain possession of the ball. They did not. They did not maintain something. Okay, so go ahead and try at number 4. And then it comes to the guided practice. Do 1, 2, 3. Then do 4, 7, 8. Um, 12. Okay, so for 10 and 11, you have to determine which expression has greater value. So, so you're going to use, your comparison symbols where it says or, and that's how you determine which expression has greater value. Or you could just tell me this expression has greater value based on, of course, you have to solve for it first. And then I'll see you again Monday. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.